What's going on, folks? Welcome back to Bev Boys, your one-stop shop for all your energy drink reviews and performance talks. I'm Christian,
Brian,
and we are the Bev Boys as always. Today, we get another staff episode here for you. Got some good topics we're going to go over. First off, getting started, I'm going to come in hot with a Reign. This is a new one I just saw today. So it's Reign Liberty and Justice for Apple. So it's like an American-themed, USA-themed type of energy drink. I'm assuming it's apple flavored. I'm really looking forward to it.
it's
Have
like
you heard about this?
I've had it. Have you seen this? Have you heard about this? Wow, what a great audience.
Is it like an apple cider type
No,
deal?
it's like a tart green apple.
Ooh, I don't
It
mind that.
it might be. So I had this off camera. Like the week it came out, DeMarco bought a case of it. He's like, "All right, here we go. Let's get after these things." You know him.
Yep.
It might actually be the best flavor of Reign.
Ooh, now that's a bold statement. You got some heavy hitters. White
I'm
gummy bear, sour gummy worm.
Yeah, but this is like I don't know like what to equivalent it to, but it's like almost it's not Ghost Sour Warheads Green Apple.
Okay.
Think of like that, but like less sugary and like in your face, but it's like a tart, crisp sour apple flavor.
All right. I
Pop
don't know
that
what
top,
I'm
man.
doing. Just waiting here.
Yeah, pop that top.
Oh, there we go. Ooh, it definitely smells like apple.
Dude, it's good.
Oh, I like that.
A
That's
lot.
real nice. Yeah, that's good. I'm a fan.
I'm a big fan. The only hard part is they're not always available everywhere because as a new like everything else, as a new flavor comes, everyone's just gonna gobble them all up, and then you're gonna be left with the scraps.
That's right.
Which is what I feel like I'm doing today, because I got the Bubblicious Strawberry Splash Ghost,
Okay.
and
Haven't had one of those in a while.
I just don't like bubble gum. A little bit of vapor on it. Like it's not terrible. I think if you didn't have the bubblegum aftertaste, it would be totally fine. I
Yeah,
just don't
unless you
love
like
bubblegum.
swallowing bubble gum.
Yeah. Pause.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a pause. Yeah. You're not supposed to swallow gum. So anyone that likes drinking a whole can of flavored beverage that tastes like bubble gum,
Is a little weird.
little sus. Just putting
Little
it out there.
sus. We do have new news today though too, because another new Ghost energy drink flavor has been released. The Ghost Sour Strips collab Apple Berry is going to be the new flavor for Sour Strips, which more than likely will be incredible. I've personally eaten the Apple Berry Sour Strips like combo flavor. Super good. Tart, then a little bit to sweet, green apple to like blue to like kind of like not blue raspberry completely, but like a mixed berry kind of deal. So super good. That'll come out, I think, on the 29th of September.
Okay.
So we'll have our A&W, and then the next month we'll have Sour Strips Collab V2, which I just don't understand what. Are we in the Matrix? Like if we are, don't take me out. Give me a new Ghost flavor every single month. Give me a new Reign every single month. Give me a new Gorilla Mind. A Bum Energy has a brand new flavor. And for anyone who is not familiar, we are in fact Ella's Fellas, and Ella Langley has a Bum Energy drink flavor called Peaches and Honey. I thought it was a joke, like a joke rendering at first. Because every time you saw it, it had like the little AI around it. I'm like, there's no way. And then sure as shit, like Bum Energy actually posted a video of her like cutting up peaches and like pouring honey on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I want to try it. I'm not like, a peach flavor is not huge to me. But I feel like at a certain point, if there's gonna be one or two that we do like, it's either gonna be with peaches. It's usually gonna be we've mentioned this before, but like Bum or like a Red Bull, like they're gonna do those flavors justice. So
I think if they can nail that actual honey flavor, that would be really good.
that's my thing, and
I
that's
hope
where
it's just not a really sweet peach. I hope it's like
yeah,
an actual honey like
like
flavor.
like at the end of it, or, tail end, you start to taste like true honey,
Right.
which I don't know how I feel about that in an energy drink, but I'm willing. I'm willing
Yeah,
to
I'm down to try.
Try anything once. Pause.
Anyway, we got a good topic to start us off today. I just mentioned this. I think
Last
it was
episode?
after we get. Yeah, I think it was after. Yeah, I just mentioned it in the last episode, and then we were like, "Hey, we can do a whole spiel just on this." So, talking about hardware versus software, and not the type that's in your computer or your phone. We're talking about hardware versus software in athletes, physical people, and essentially how some people have more hardware, some people have more software, and what do you do differently when training those people? Do you do anything differently? So just to kind of give a little bit of a layover, hardware, when I think of hardware, I think of just like the tissues of the body. So like the general machinery of your body. So you got muscles, bones, joints, connective tissue, fascia, all that good stuff. A bodybuilder has a lot of hardware. They have a lot of muscle mass. A power lifter has a lot of hardware. This is the stuff that can be built through training, obviously over time. And then when I think of software, you're thinking of like nerves, sensory organs, like your GTOs, your muscle spindles, your CNS, if you will. And you're thinking about the software. You're probably thinking about the central nervous system as a whole, your joint receptors, your brain, stuff like that. So two very different things. And I think they can both definitely be trained and improved. But I think you see, my example is like, I feel like you see a lot of guys with either a lot of athletes with either a lot of one, like crazy software, not a lot of hardware, or vice versa. And ideally you have both. Like I gave an example of like a pitcher, like crazy software. They can throw really hard, even though they're, 6'2", $170, but they might not have the hardware. They may not have a ton of lean muscle mass and, structure around their bones and joints in order to support that long term. So that maybe put them at a larger risk for injury. Versus we all know, I think it's more common to see the guys that have a ton of hardware and not a lot of software. I feel like these are usually your weight room warriors. Like you get them in the weight room and they're like front squatting 405, benching 315 plus, like doing crazy stuff, super strong, like really good at like the high slow force stuff in the weight room, but they're usually not as good at their sport. Now, obviously there's always exceptions to every rule, but that's kind of what I envision when I think of like hardware focused athletes. And just doing a little bit of, obviously most people know, like when you first start resistance training, I thought this was interesting because a lot of times when you first start resistance training when you're young, the first adaptations are neural and then it becomes structural over time, which kind of made me think, because do you think the first adaptations are neural because people are starting to train when they are a little bit younger, like when you're 12 to 14 years old and you don't have quite as many hormones? Or do you think that's just because like the software, the central nervous system is more adaptable when you're younger? That's something that I was thinking of. Like if someone starts training for the first time at 25, are they going to get that same effect? Because to me, like, and maybe this is a bad take, but I would rather have, just think about when people scout for like the NBA draft, the MLB draft, stuff like that. A lot of the guys that are picked up front, especially like NBA, they're really good players, but they may not be the best players at that time, but they have the highest ceiling. And a lot of times those guys are guys you would characterize as crazy software and then they have like room to kind of build that hardware. Think of like a
Yeah.
Giannis Antetokounmpo when he first got drafted. Obviously, his frame, he had a crazy frame, but like he was super
There was
skinny.
no muscular tissue on there.
Right. Or like how many freshmen or like international players are like that are, 18, 19 years old are the lottery picks in the NBA draft. A lot of times they're the guys that have room to fill out. Now, obviously, basketball is a lot different sport than like football where, physicality is essentially a necessity. But you see this in baseball too, like high school kids getting drafted out of high school, 18, 19 years old. Scrawny kids, but they're in it, maybe they throw 95 or maybe they hit the ball, 110 and they just have more room to fill out. Do you think that the neural adaptations that come from strength training early on, do you think that's because people start strength training that early, or do you think it's because of something else?
Yeah. I think it's a little bit of mix of both, and I'm going to give a couple examples here. Number one, you're right. There's not as much hormonal like things going on at this when you're first starting into this. Especially if they start to train when they're 11, 12, 13. Now they may be starting to get those hormonal changes, but I think a lot of that is, hey, your body doesn't have this. You're not strong enough in order to have true, like, I do feel like there's like a base layer of mechanical stress that like the body can handle no matter what. Like you watch a 5-year-old, they can't bench 95 pounds. They can't squat 95 pounds, but they can jump off of a 6-foot freaking box and land on the ground. That's probably 4 times fucking body weight right there. You know what I mean? Like when they're playing on the playground and things like that. The body can handle that. They just don't know the patterns of which to, I guess, exhibit that. So I think there's a little bit of that will play into it. I think the other thing is it's a lot of new motor patterns. And if we go by the laws of motor learning or motor development, new patterns can be quickly adapted at certain age ranges and things like that to where it's going to fire. So I think if we kind of go in this sense here, it's a little bit of mix of both. I don't think the hormones are there quite developed yet, but I think because they're learning new movement patterns and kind of grooving them, that you're going to get a lot of initial central nervous system adaptation, even through 2-3 times of just repeating this movement. Now, a good point that you mentioned was like you look at like a 25-year-old. My girlfriend's, I'm not going to say her age. She'll shoot me. This is a joke, Sony.
Never ask a woman their age.
But she's older than 18 and she's older than 29, younger than 31.
I hope she doesn't listen to this.
Yeah.
You should have stopped at older than 18.
Yeah. Well, that one just sounded weird. I had to like actually like provide real clarity to it. I can't leave it at that.
We gotta continue. This is getting too weird.
Yeah.
We're gonna get canceled.
But she started lifting when we started dating. Like she's played soccer and like been kind of a little bit of an athlete when she was in high school, but like never really truly trained, done run clubs and whatnot. And then now like there's certain limitations even to stuff that she does, even when we're introducing it to her. So like, doing a couple weird stuff that we do, it's like, well, she wants to train a little bit like that, but it's hard for her to figure out, even like when we go golfing and swinging a golf club. This is all new, like information that's having to be percepted from her eyes to her brain, kind of organized, and then the body has to move around. It takes a little bit longer. I think that, when they say like you can't teach an old dog new tricks, I don't think that that's true. I do think that as you age out of that like 13 to 22 kind of stage, it becomes a little bit more of a learning curve because you don't have the primary stress going to the body being a little bit more neural in that sense. I'm a little fucked up and I don't really know my words that I want to say right now when it comes to this, because you make a really good point. Like, is it because there's an absence of hormones, or is it because it's just, new moving patterns, recruitment, etc., and your ability to be adaptable, I think at a young age is extremely high. So I think like a little bit of that like plays to the central nervous system and get those neural adaptations right away,
Yeah,
and
that's a good
peripheral
point.
nervous system.
Right. It's a good point because I think I, and I could be wrong on this, I often kind of associate software with like more so the skill acquisition side. Like I think
Mm-hmm.
most sports performance S&C programs are very much hardware based. And I think there's good reason for that. Like it's a lot more general. But when you first start training, it's kind of a little bit of both. Like you're learning those movement patterns, and like I would highly recommend you guys check out Jeremy Frisch and his stuff. He's big on like the ages, 6 to 12, 6 to 13. That's where you really make those like adaptations in software by just like not specializing in any one sport, doing a wide variety of different activities, free play and whatnot. So it's interesting because when you first start resistance training, you've never done it before, you're getting skill acquisition in that aspect. And then obviously as you go on, you're getting more of like the hardware aspect of it too. But when I think of like software, I think of more like the skill acquisition side. Like if I had to put like one sentence to like what are like the best at, like what encompasses the best athletes, I think they're the best at solving complex movement problems. Like good athletes can obviously the
Step into
physical
any
out,
sport.
right? Like obviously like the raw physical outputs are really cool. Like they can jump high, they can run fast, they can move heavy loads. Um, but the biggest thing is they can go into any situation and just kind of like figure something out. They can pick up things very quickly. And I think you'll find this from just even with like conversations with like some of the athletes that I've worked with. A lot of times, obviously early sports specialization is a lot bigger in today's age.
Yeah.
But even like a lot of the players I've worked with, maybe they only played baseball competitively, but like a lot of the ones where I'm like, okay, I consider them good athletes. They'd be like, oh yeah. I ask them like, did you play any other sports? Like, I only really played baseball like competitively, but I played a lot of like pickup basketball in my free time, or tennis. Like they're doing multiple things versus the guys who only maybe did one sport and didn't even do anything else even for fun. Those guys aren't going to be able to step into as many different movement situations and solve those problems. Which is why I think it's like super important, obviously, early on. Uh, it doesn't. I mean, it doesn't matter how good you are when you're 12. You want to be good when you're 18 to whatever 30.
When you
So
paid for it.
yeah, I was gonna say, it's
So I have a question for you on this front. How much of being like a software versus hardware coded athlete is nature versus nurture?
ooh, that's a good question.
You know what I mean? Because I've seen people who predominantly, most of the time, you are going to see some of these athletes who are what we would consider really good athletes, like you said, having done multiple sports, whether it be competitively or non competitively, but they played everything.
Mm-hmm.
Did they gravitate towards playing everything because they could pick it up really quickly, because they were naturally a really good athlete? Or did they just have the curiosity of the mind to want to be involved in everything and those skills developed?
Like anything,
I,
I think it is a little bit of both. This brings up a good point of like how much does genetics play a role? And I've heard varying opinions on this. I think a lot of people will say like, oh, genetics makes up 60 to 70% of your athletic potential.
I feel like that's a
I don't
cop out.
know. It is, yeah, and that's where I'm kind of going with this. One, the human genome is like super complex. Super. I think I want to say they've found over like 20,000 different genes or something like that. I may be
Yeah.
severely overshooting that, but very complex. We don't know a terribly large amount about it, I think, to make that statement. Also, I don't know how you're measuring that. Um, And it's one of those things where it's like, even if it is true, like if you're thinking like that, you're probably going to be worse off in the end versus if you were saying like, oh, I can really kind
I
of
can adapt.
I can adapt, I can control my destiny by the way I train.
Mm-hmm.
I've also heard, actually heard someone I work with say like, oh, I think it's almost all nurture, like what you train, especially from that early age. Like if you have someone that just ends up like doing a lot of sprinting and jumping, they're going to end up being really good at sprinting and jumping, which obviously that plays into the law, like the SAID principle, specificity. You're going to do something and get better at the things you're doing more often because it's more specific to what you're doing. I think it's a little bit more, I almost want to say it's a little bit more nurtured than we might think. Obviously, genetics is going to play a role. Like if you have two parents that both played, Division I athletics, you're probably going to have a better starting spot from someone or a better like ceiling theoretically. But I think a big part of it depends on what you're doing. Like, are you playing a lot of sports at a young age? I think, I would say it's more than nurture, to be honest with you. Obviously, people are going to gravitate towards what they're better at over time. But I think if you're exposed to all those different things and are just not really thinking about, oh, I'm trying to be the best baseball player when I'm 8 years old. I'm just trying to like have fun and do all these different things like a normal kid.
It's kind of akin to this. Like, I think the genetics plays a role in the elite of the elite. You look at like your Giannis, your Aaron Donald, your Aaron Judge, a LeBron kind of aspect. And I say LeBron because he might not be the best basketball player in my eyes in the entire world, but damn it, he's a pretty good athlete. Like, he picked up golf relatively quickly. He was a good football player, like an Allen Iverson. You look at that, a Randy Moss, those kind of guys who they were just like, yeah, they did everything. They were so good, blah, 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 blah. I think those guys, that elite of the elite, where it's like they probably could have played pro in 2 sports. Mm-hmm. That's the dudes where it's like genetics play a good amount of role. I think for everybody else after that, it's a lot more nurture than we give it credit for. And I kind of akin it to, you can go buy a Ferrari. Ferrari's fast already. It's ready to roll. You just hop in it, turn it on, boom, get on the road. A lot of people are the Nissan Skyline R34, the Mazda, the old school like Mazdas, the Toyota Supras, where there's a pretty good car right there. But when you start building that engine and working on it, now it can become that, that 180 mile per hour car that can take the corner real quick, look sick, that kind of thing. It's got the body work on it. That's what I think. For most people, it's a lot more nurture. The elite of the elite, those 1%ers, that's probably a lot of genetics. And maybe you're never going to be a 1%er. But I've seen a lot of 2%ers become NFL legends. I've seen a lot of 2%ers become college football legends. I've seen a lot of 2%ers become basketball legends. I've seen Steve Kerr. He's probably a 2%er. Maybe even a 3%er.
Well, and I'd almost argue that he has good software because he's obviously like very good at the skill of shooting 3-pointers. Steph Curry, same thing. Like, not a lot of hardware and maybe not like crazy software in the sense that like, oh, this guy's just like naturally crazy athletic, but
he's very fluid,
like
he's a good athlete.
The rim, the stuff that matters for like actually getting buckets, which is.
But he's also just a naturally good athlete, and that's probably from exposure. Like, he was good at basketball. He's nasty at golf as of now, but like even when he was younger, like his passion was basketball, but he was playing a lot of like sports just as a kid because his dad was exposing him to everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point because I think you talk about the 1%, but that's all we see when we watch, sports on TV. So it's almost this like recency and like visibility bias of like, oh, that's all we're seeing. So we think that genetics is we attribute everything to genetics because we're only seeing like the elite of the elite when it comes to that. When we're watching literally
We're,
any pro sports.
yeah, we're checking that like tiniest little bit of population versus the normative value, and we're like, see, we can never be like that. It's like you don't necessarily have to be like that. But if you even look at the difference between a college sport versus a professional, right? You look at the Olympics, you're seeing the absolute most dominant at the physical and skill acquisition qualities of that event type, whether it's track and field, curling or whatever it is. But a lot of those athletes, while being pretty hardware coded, they have to be software coded because the margins for error are so small that you have to be pretty software coded. And then you kind of look at, there's a little bit of an argument here, and I know we're hopping around, but it's also like, how fluid is somebody when it comes to their athleticism? I think of, we look at like, I mentioned it a little bit last podcast, I said like a Dexter McCluster, but I'm thinking also like a Tavon Austin, a DeAnthony Thomas. Those two guys are clearly not hardware coded. They're smaller individuals. They're 5'9", 5'10", 175 pounds, but incredible. They always talked about these other things of incredible vision, burst, speed, ability to cut, fluid in and out of routes or fluid when cutting, those types of things. Great punt returner. I'm using two football people as an example, but my point being is they weren't big jacked dudes. They weren't like, you kind of look like a Ray Lewis, who was a little bit more rigid, obviously a bigger body, but he was a little bit more rigid. He's probably more predominant towards hardware than software, whereas these guys were far more software. And obviously, two extreme examples, but I think helps make the point clearer, is Tavon was incredible. He's got the best college highlight I've ever seen in my life. I think anyone else would agree with me. DeAnthony Thomas was a 2-sport athlete in college. He was like, I think, a 3-sport athlete in high school. Did they both have great NFL careers? Probably not, but like, I think that you see the success of that point of being like a little bit more nurtured to be very just athletic.
Yeah, and I think you'll hear a lot of people talking about like muscular driven versus like
Tendon
or like elastic driven athletes. I think you can kind of liken, the hardware to more of the muscular driven athlete archetype and the software to more of the tendon driven athlete. Like, I think that's been a very big talking point in performance. Just two different type of athletes, and they can both like excel in the same sport. Now the bigger question is does that change the way that you approach training with either of those type of athletes? And I would say yes and no. Like, I think a lot of that comes from a little bit more training allocation as opposed to like, specific exercises, sets, reps. Like, if I have someone who's, maxed out physical qualities wise but the skill is very lacking, I would probably almost put that, I'm putting the physical stuff, I'm touching maintenance on that, putting it on the back burner, so to say, and just taking more of my stress and allocating it to, skill acquisition stuff, more neural stuff, more proprioceptive work, and maybe even that can flow into the weight room too. But more time, on the field. We've talked about this, like more time on the field, less time in the weight room. If you have an hour with a guy who's maxed out physical, like he's really strong, all that stuff, if you have an hour, you're probably better to spend 40 minutes on the field and 20 in the weight room versus vice versa. And I think
you already have such a threshold of the physical quality.
Right. And I think like kind of the base, if a performance coach has an hour, a lot of times it's the other way, 20 minutes on the field to start and then 40 in the weight room, which not to say that that's good or bad, versus, more of a software driven athlete that, okay, they're really good at the skill, but like maybe they could just use a little bit more armor, so to say. That would just kind of keep them a little bit more resilient. You see this with guys that just like they're really good. Like people talk about them, but they're always like banged up. I think that's like a big like opportunity where it's just like, oh, they can't stay healthy because like their software like outruns their hardware. Like they just don't have enough to like
there's not enough RAM in the computer.
Exactly. It's like if I take like an M2 chip from Apple and I'm putting it in a BlackBerry, like the software is crazy, but it's a BlackBerry versus, the other way around. It's like I have a MacBook Pro, but I'm using a SIM card. Like they need to match up. They need to be able to match each other. So I think you could almost kind of like flip that. Obviously you're still going to touch stuff on the field and touch stuff with in the skill acquisition realm, but you're going to focus a little bit more on, the weight room, or maybe that could even be as simple as shifting set and rep schemes. Maybe you're going to do some hypertrophy clusters versus some like straight sets of just like true strength. That's kind of where my mind goes as far as training decisions. I don't think it's as much like picking different exercises. You could say you could go that direction, but I almost think it's just general allocation of training, in my opinion. And the tough part is like, it's tempting to do like the opposite, because like what does everybody want to see when like they see a guy can bench 405? They want to fucking keep seeing him bench heavier weights, because it's like, oh, this is really sick. Let's just keep having him do that stuff that he's really good at. But that may not be the best thing for him.
I think that's, we kind of look at this and we talk about, do you train the deficiency or do you train the proficiency? Yeah. And we really make you good at what you're good at, or do we try and elevate your floor, ceiling versus floor, right? And when we talk about like a software versus hardware coded athlete, it's like, especially when we look at this, and speaking of the specific examples that we said, it's like, what's their training age? Number one. Number two, versus what is their proficiency in, right? And if I look at like a young athlete, it's like, just train everything, because they're so young, they're going to adapt to all of it. If they're a little bit higher of a training age, then it's get after it immediately on trying to get their floor raised. If it's like, at somewhere late high school to that like college years, it's like, raise that floor, make them an all-around better athlete, because while you touch on the other residual quality, it's going to keep improving, at least small improvements. But then you get to like the professional, etc. level, it's like, unless something is extremely like red flag, like alert going off, I would immediately go towards train the proficiency, because that's what got them there, and they're late in the career. It's like, try to get what we can out of this. I think that's like the biggest thing that'll kind of allocate the training economy of proficiency versus deficiency. I think it's a little bit easier though with a software coded athlete. I think a lot of these athletes that become professionals are more predominantly, maybe so the like middle of the spectrum, but leaning software coded, because they had that skill acquisition and genuinely good athleticism. You look at like a Saquon Barkley, you look at him from the eye test and you're probably like, it's a hardware guy for sure. Saquon is extremely athletic. He's raw outputs are, when we look at sprinting, jumping, all this, it screams software. And then you see him move and you're like, this guy is a software coded athlete that had training economy spent on hardware proficiency. And he's built the quote unquote, like you said, the armor around the athlete around that. They took the M2 chip and they were like, oh my gosh, we need to put him in a MacBook Pro. And they built a MacBook Pro for that software chip. I think that's the cool thing about it. But That's kind of where I see a lot of it is like they're middle of the spectrum, but definitely lean towards software. So you see that those structural gains or capacity points of the large shoulders, the abs, the body that just is developed, because that's the longevity play. That's how you get to play for 8 years.
Right. And I think it can also be as simple as like time of the year. Like I tend to think of training strengths and weaknesses. Like if you're going to address weaknesses, to me, that's a little bit better suited for the off-season period versus like earlier off-season period versus training, touching on the strengths is a little bit better for in season. Obviously, you're going to have a little bit of both. But I'm just thinking like if you're, for example, like if a guy needs to put on, if I'm trying to increase lean tissue in season one, like that's a tough challenge to do in season, and it's not something that can be done in, I need 8+ weeks to really like work on something like that. I'm not going to say like, all right, I run a 4-week, hypertrophy bias program and I'm going to put, 5 pounds of muscle on you. That's not how it works. At least for most people. So I tend to think like working on their weaknesses is a little bit better suited for off season. Might dose in a little bit of it in season. And obviously it's going to be context dependent on the sport as well. But then keeping them good at what they're good at. And I know we've talked about this a little bit. Like, is it better to train people to really like supercharge their strengths, or is it better to bring up their weaknesses? I don't really know. Like I think ideally you do both, but I don't know if there's a right or a wrong answer there. I do think like, yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say there's probably a right and a wrong answer for every individualistic situation, which is no one's gonna love what I just said right there. So
it's the truth, though.
Yeah. So I think that's a big toughie, but the other thing that makes me think about this in this context is like we talk about software, we talk about hardware. Again, we've said those two terms, and we're 37 minutes in. For anyone that is just picking up or they blacked out and didn't hear us before, software is going to be those maybe possibly classified maybe as a tendon driven or these more generally athletic qualities. Maybe not as muscular on the eye test, whereas the hardware is a little bit more physical qualities in the force output, the strength, those raw numbers, but maybe not as fluid of an athlete. They're a little bit more stiff, maybe a little bit more rigid. We think of like a basketball player versus a bodybuilder if we're going to go the two like most dogmatic ends of the spectrum between these two, right? The other thing, I think each sport kind of requires a little bit different piece on that spectrum, right? Like, again, skill acquisition plays a large part. And that's not to say a thing like bodybuilding doesn't have a massive skill acquisition when it comes to, say, posing. But I think most of the sport is developing the body to then pose, whereas the posing is very difficult. Like, not going to short credit that. But if you think of like the skill between bodybuilding and the skill between having to make, 50 to 60% from the field in a basketball game, like that's way different.
Yeah. And likewise, hitting a 95-mile-an-hour fastball.
Way different, yeah. Whereas the muscular tissue is developed to continuously repeat that output versus develop the ability to pose from that. But I guess where I'm kind of going on this is when we think of these sports along the spectrum of software versus hardware coded, do you think there's anomalies in there true enough to be like, it doesn't matter as much, or do you think they're more just statistical anomalies when you do have, maybe not a bodybuilder or a basketball player that's able to bodybuild, right? I think that's a little tougher because they're never going to have that full of frame. But like
Ben Wallace.
I guess, yeah.
That's a just an one-off example though.
But I guess like I'm thinking of like someone who is in a sport that would naturally lay in maybe a far more software coded and they're far more hardware coded, but like they're having success. Do you think there's enough of those in each of those categories in order to nullify and say it doesn't matter as much? Or do you think that those are just still so few and far between that the software coded athletes will predominantly gravitate towards software coded sports? And maybe there's one or two, but there's not really enough to say, nah.
That's a good one. I think football comes to mind to me because it's interesting. I feel like you need a good blend of both, depending on the position, obviously.
Yeah.
I think obviously just like bigger humans will gravitate towards sports like that. Like high school coach sees a big kid, they're like, I need him on my football team. They need to be a lineman for me.
That kid's not coordinated, but I need him as a lineman.
Exactly.
Big body.
Versus like track, like a sprinter in track's another one to me where it's like you can be. There's a wide range of builds when it comes to like high level sprinters. Like you got people like Usain Bolt or like a Asafa Powell or Johan Blake, and then you also have like a Christian Coleman or like a Noah Lyles. Like there's a good or like a Andre DeGrasse. Like a lot of variability in like frames there. They're either like pretty
wiry,
lean, like still have some muscle mass. Obviously, you're not really going to find like a fat sprinter at that level. At least you're not going to find a fat sprinter at that level. Versus like a Johan Blake, like jacked out of his mind. Looks a little bit different from like a Christian Coleman. Like we talked about, he's just got kind of like a weird build, like small arms, like its proportions are a little bit different. I don't know. It goes back to the things like, oh, like you're going to do what you're good at and you're probably going to do that. At some point, you're going to be best at one thing, and that's going to be the thing that you do if you want to keep playing because that's the only option you have. How many people have you heard? You heard pro athletes say like, oh, I liked, like Michael Jordan. He said baseball was my first love, but he was, obviously he was better at basketball, even though he's somehow like still pretty damn good at baseball. Same thing, Tracy McGrady. He said baseball was my first love. He was better at basketball. A lot of times those guys just keep playing that one sport because they ended up being better at it, and so that's what they can continue to do to, be at a high level and make money from it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a good one. I don't have a great answer for it, honestly. Like,
okay.
At some point, I think you just get phased out. Everyone gets phased out at some point unless you're going to be, at the highest level. And I don't know if you can put that on like just one or the other, hardware versus software.
Okay. I got two things.
What do you think?
It's really tough. And I kind of think of it like, I used the Allen Iverson thing before, but like everyone who knows him from like his younger days was like, he was better at football. But then he gravitated towards basketball because he enjoyed it more and then became Allen fucking Iverson. You know what I mean? So like he became AI, dude.
Mm-hmm.
So you make a really good point that like getting phased out, like even at the top, at a certain point, the skills are no longer adaptable. Maybe it's due to your own age. Maybe it's due to the game changing. Those pieces, I think, are so different every 3 years. You look at the, and I know I keep going back to the NFL example, but you look at the NFL 5 years ago. It was not what it is today. You look at it back to 2010. 15, 16 years ago. Completely different ball game. Even in 2015, 2016, completely different ball game. 2015, 2016, we still had I formations and people lining up under center. Now, if you see someone lining up under center, you're like, oh, it's a goal line. They're doing a tush push. Otherwise, everyone is shotgun snap. Everyone is high motions, air raid, or like a speed kind of like offense in that sense. It was not what it was even just 10 years ago. Same thing on defense. Seeing base defenses being at like a 4-3 or a 3-4 is few and far between now. Everyone's lining up in 4-2-5s or kind of in like a modified 3-4 where a strong safety's playing one of those linebacker roles, like, or like a nickel defense or a dime is kind of like starting defenses. I think the game's evolving. I mean, basketball as well. You look at basketball, the structure of the game has changed predominantly to, playing in the paint to outside shooters. So it's now a lot more software coded athletes with very high shooting percentage skills versus maybe some of these traditionally bigs, quote unquote, those 4s and 5s that are playing in the paint, having to kind of muscle around. Bigs don't look like bigs bigs were 10 years ago anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I think the games that are evolving are kind of changing that. Whereas, like, not to say baseball hasn't changed. I think it definitely has, for sure. Like, you have different pitch clocks. The speed of the velo of pitchers is different. But, like, they've done a pretty good job of keeping the structure of the game and its integrity of, like, original pretty similar. Now, there's more creative defensive plays within the outfield of, turning doubles and whatnot. But for the most part, it's pretty locked on, like, one team goes into the outfield, one team goes to hit, and that's what it's going to be.
Yeah, there's less, there's
less variance.
Just the constraints of the game are such that, like, I can't put my, baseball and, or football and basketball, you can line up and,
whatever you want.
Like if I'm basketball, I can play a man, I can play a 3-2, I can play a 2-3, I can play a 2-1-2, I can, like, versus baseball, it's like you can do a shift, but you can only, like, you can't just put all your...
That shift is only really for, like, one, maybe two
couple
plays.
Situations. Yeah. It's people aren't going to do that for the whole game. Yeah.
So I think things like that play a large role into this piece too.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when you see, like, the spectrum outside of, like, where someone may fall in line or out of line on what their sport requires. With the kind of goalpost changing of where that sport becomes, I think that's when you'll see a little bit more variance in it versus, like, a little bit less variance where the sport can't truly change. Like a baseball, I think you'll have a little bit more of the... Yeah, there's the onesie, twosies that, you look at, like a Tim Lincecum that we talked about. He's like a onesie, twosie versus a lot of pitchers, even if they're tall and, muscular, they're still pretty software coded to be, like, high velocity, like, athletes.
Right.
And then, like, a big hitter is typically always going to look like a big hitter. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Mass moves mass in baseball. So you'll see maybe one or two, and that rule applies to, like, we genuinely kind of need this archetype versus there's so much that it doesn't matter. Whereas in, like, a football, a basketball, I think even a soccer, you'll see a lot of, like, that kind of moving. Like, do they move, are they running a false nine? Are they, what's the scheme that they're running, and that changing so often, even week to week, they're changing their entire scheme.
Mm-hmm.
I think that changes a lot of it. But I guess if I, like, just started rattling off and you had to choose either software, hardware, or center software, center hardware, and I just started rattling off a couple of sports, you think you could play some where you...
Yeah.
Okay.
Give it a shot.
Let's start with a couple easy ones. Let's go football.
Football, go hardware. Not to say that, and I say that because software is also important, but I think football is like one of the few sports where it's like if you're not physically adept, like you're not even
Going to.
playing.
Yeah.
Like you're done.
So basketball.
I'll say software there.
Baseball.
Oof. I'll say software there too. That one's a little bit tougher.
You
But
think
I've
like
just
middle
seen-
software maybe?
Yeah, just because like I've seen, you got your obviously the steroid era can tell you a lot about like hardware, within baseball, like big jack dudes just hitting 500-foot home runs, but also like just seen too many like players that are so much more adept in the skill and that I think could benefit from more hardware, but like it's primarily just like skill acquisition. Like I've seen a lot of like freaky athletes that can do a lot of crazy outputs, but just lacking more in the skill from my experience. So I'll say it leans a little bit more towards software.
Tennis.
Oof. Yeah, I think software.
I think that one's a
Sure.
software through and through.
Yeah.
Softball. It's such a different sport than baseball. I think it leans more hardware.
Yeah, so do I. Yeah, I agree.
American soccer or European football.
I'd say software. Those are a little bit tougher because like
It's definitely
strength
aerobic.
is different. Yeah, like strength is I think it's like the demands of the game are so much different. Like
It's not just the physical
conditioning-
strength; it's the
Right,
physical
like,
qualities.
the conditioning aspect plays a lot bigger role.
Mm-hmm. I think this one's going to play a little bit
Yeah,
closer
maybe
to a
play
previous
it.
one.
Yeah, I think it almost plays like more middle, but leaning towards
Software.
yeah.
Okay. Rugby.
Go hardware on that one.
Do you?
So it's a little bit. I
I
think
feel
I
like
do.
it's middle playing. I think it's
It's
middle playing hard,
hardware leaning to me.
Yeah.
Like it's similar to. I mean, it's similar to football, with
but it's also very similar to
padding,
soccer.
but a lot more running too. Yeah.
And you have to like there is skill acquisition. Like how many times are they doing like the little drop punt kicks,
Mm-hmm.
things like that? I think that's tough.
Yeah, it is tough.
Golf.
That one's tough too. I think it leans more towards software though. Although, like, you see, obviously, you're going to see both types of athletes in all these sports.
Mm-hmm.
But just think of like the frequency of like, think of like prime Tiger Woods had both. Like,
Yeah, he was the most
Versus-
probably center.
yeah, versus like, I'd say like Bryson DeChambeau is like,
Definitely hardware.
yeah, like he'll drive his like putting is not the best, but he can drive the ball so far that he kind of makes up for that. Versus like maybe like a Rory McIlroy. I'd say he has a little bit of both too. Like I know he trains.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a tough one. You can compensate for either one.
Within the game itself, I know that
Right.
makes it tough. Like I
Mhm.
want to say it leans software because it's so skill dependent,
Yeah.
but at the same time, like you've seen a lot of people like, and this is I think a really good one that's weird on this spectrum is like a Scotty Scheffler. He's so skillful, but then like, well, maybe no. I think maybe he just leans a lot more software coded because he did train for a long time. He was a junior golfer, but like his form, quote unquote, on his swing technique is not traditional in any way. It's very raw looking, but he's able to just step into that and repeat it because he's such a good athlete. You know what I mean?
Right.
But then if you put him in a situation that isn't golf, I don't know if he's a good basketball player, if he can just play pickup and just annihilate. I don't know. So it's like that one's very difficult to me. Kind of getting into some weird ones, so like curling.
I'd say that's more software. It's just like the touch, I feel like there's a lot of like proprioception and like perception of like, okay, I push it this much and it'll go this far. Like that's like a lot of, but then it depends on what position. Like the people that are scrubbing, that's just like, that's a little bit more hardware.
See, I'm glad that you mentioned those exact words because I have another one for you I need you to argue wrestling.
Oof.
Because, you look at it and you go, oh, clearly hardware. But then you just mentioned those specific points for curling, and it's like, you got to know the positions, the right amount of pressure, the right touch, the technical aspect.
Yeah, wrestling's interesting because it's a weight class sport.
Mm-hmm.
It's like in theory, like you think like, okay, if they're the same weight, the skill would be the differentiator, but there's also, it depends on like how much weight people are willing to cut too. Like who is it? Like a Gordon Ryan, like very skillful, but he's also just like stronger than everyone, just beats the shit out of everybody.
Yeah.
But it's still like the same weight class. So I think that's a tough one. That's a tough one because it's like all around. It's like a technical. You have to be strong, and you also have to have tremendous conditioning too.
Yeah. So I think it plays maybe middle towards hardware.
Yeah.
Because the hardware is going to be the physical prowess of strength, but also like aerobic activity, the conditioning.
Mm-hmm.
But you still have to be very technical because
that one's tough. If it's like a spider chart, it's like just a circle.
It's
just a circle.
It's everywhere, everything everywhere all at once. And like you look at like every big, the what's his name, Bradley Martin, where he's like, dude, you think you could beat me in wrestling? And it's like, but I'm 250. It's like, yeah, but Mighty Mouse, who's an MMA fighter, like he could probably kill you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like there's some of those things where it's like he could step in and he's just gonna put you in a chokehold. Doesn't matter if you're 250 or not. Cricket.
Ooh. I feel like I don't know enough about the sport. But I'll say that's a tough one. Because they do be chucking that thing.
And they're throwing it hard.
Yeah, like I'm stumped on that one.
I feel like cricket is middle playing software.
Yeah, because I feel like there's the skill of, I liken it, it's similar to baseball in the throwing a little bit. Like obviously the delivery
implements different,
different, but
volleyball.
Oof.
I feel like it's a little bit more hardware.
You think? I was almost gonna say.
Well, like a volleyball player, like has to be pretty skillful within. I mean, it's a small area, but like you're playing within like 5 yards in a fight in a phone booth. Like, but I liken it a little bit more to like football. Like, you're looking for a specific kind of archetype of a body. Like they definitely have to be, too. They have to be skillful in that position. Like a libero is very different than a right side hitter.
Yes, I was just gonna say like that.
But I think it's a little bit more hardware coded of like you kind of need the structure, you kind of need to have like a physical output.
Mm-hmm.
It's tough. I guess like the way we could look at this is how easy could someone maybe not at the top, but like someone that's good at that sport could hop into another sport and be at least moderately successful. I think that would be like a pretty good way. And I don't intend it to be like, well, kind of dog in the fact that like if someone's hardware coded, they're not a good athlete. It's like, not necessarily. It's just software is more so akin to like raw athleticism and being able to step in. Whereas hardware is like, you probably are like a little bit more physically
Yeah.
like a more, and the for coactives, like you're probably more leaning towards physical and like, but you
Less
can,
technical.
yeah.
That's that is a good way to. I do think that's a good prompt. I'm still like a little bit domed up on the volleyball.
Pause.
The volleyball question has me confused.
I
You
think,
gotta stop doing
you
it.
know, now that I said that, I feel like volleyball would kind of be a little bit more software coded because they're generally like all around pretty good athletes. Like they can jump, they can move, they can maneuver, good in the
Dive,
environment, they can dive. Like
have to work within a small space. There's a conditioning aspect. Like the volleys are very variable in the length of time that they last.
I feel like if you put like a volleyball player, and like if you put a volleyball player maybe in like a track, like there's a lot of volleyball players that are also high jumpers, you know, in like a high school realm. Do they probably also maybe play basketball? Like they're probably pretty well rounded.
Yeah.
So I would probably
here's
say
a good one. Yeah, you
I
continue.
got one, but I want you to go first. I want to see if you have.
What do you track and field? And this makes me wonder because like, would those guys be good? Would those guys or gals be good in a different sport? And I think this one's a little bit tough because obviously
I think event dependent.
Yeah, like the sport is like just running or jumping. Like the sport is very much so the training for other sports.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I take a sprinter, 100-meter sprinter, 100 and 200 meter person, and put them in a basketball game, like they're going to be fast, obviously, but like they're not having to do all the other types of movements that are encompassed within a basketball game.
Yeah, this is. I think you're going to have your. I think you'll have your outliers.
It's tough though because what can you attribute? What part of that can you attribute to this quote unquote concept of hardware versus software that we're talking about, and how much of that can you attribute to just specificity of training?
Mm-hmm. That's
because you can't expect someone to be good at something if they've never done it before
or even trained it.
Yeah, like I'm not going to be good at. You're not gonna if you never played basketball. You're probably not just going to have natural. Yeah, you're not going to have a natural touch around the rim. You're not going to be able to move laterally because you only run straight and turn left.
Okay, I think I got it. I think if you didn't start in track and field, but a lot of track and field athletes started as other athletes that joined track and field and treated it more as training until they realized they loved it and enjoyed it and were successful at it. I think if you do that, you're probably a little bit more software coded. I was that way. I was a football player and began track and field and then started to dabble. And like I played baseball just recreationally, not for my high school team or anything. Wrestled for a little bit, whatever. That's going to be the more software coded ones. But I've also seen collegiate sprinters who cannot throw a ball, like literally can't figure out how to overhand throw a ball.
Mm-hmm.
So like, I think predominantly.
That's a good point. I've seen a lot of first, people come out and throw the first pitch. I've seen a lot of those this year.
Tough.
And like a lot of time, like sometimes they are like athletes, like I think Julian Sayin, the Ohio State quarterback, threw out the first pitch when we were in Columbus, and it's like, and then when we were at home, they had some of the kids from the Grandview football team, which is an NAIA powerhouse. I think they're just coming off a natty championship. And it's like it doesn't always look athletic. It doesn't always transfer even from like different sports that you might think are like similar. Like they had their wrestling team there. Their wrestling team is historically very, very good. They're known as like the Iowa of NAIA, essentially. That arm action didn't look great.
No.
Not this, but it's not because they're not. It's not because they're not good athletes. Like they were national champs. It's way different.
It's a different skill. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a different skill.
But I guess on this topic, like I would say, like if you're a one eventer, probably going to be more hardware coded, unless you were predominantly in a different sport, stepped into track and field a little later in the game,
right?
Because you've experienced.
more of just a pure output. Like, what can I do to get the fastest time within this specific race versus what are you categorizing like a heptathlete, decathlete?
See, but that's where I was going to go with this exactly. Is like I look at like a heptathlete, decathlete, they're going to be a little more software coded.
Because they have to learn so many different skills and be
and their training
above
is learning
average at all of them.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes. 100%.
They obviously have that base, but they need to be. Yeah, it's like who can be like above average at all the events, not just really good at 2 or 3 and then trash at the other 7 or 8.
Exactly. Versus like a distance runner is probably gonna be very hardware coded. Like you ask them to start like sprinting even, and they're like, "What are you talking about?"
Yeah.
I got one more for you, and I don't think it's gonna be what you think it is when you first think of it. Hockey.
My initial thought is hardware.
Nope, then you're right. I think it's hardware like a mother.
Yeah.
You ever watch them do a pull-up?
I was going to say just the pure physics. I mean, and like the more we talk about this, the more I think about it, it's so tough. We're obviously generalizing a little bit.
Yeah.
Every sport is going to have an aspect of both. Like in the skill aspect is always going to be, but yeah, I think more so hard, like the conditioning, like there's a reason like they sub every few minutes, like the conditioning, like
is so high.
Yeah. Yeah, I just think of like hockey fights. I think of hardware. Like obviously there's a skill to like you're literally skating on ice, like you're playing on a different surface than most any other sport.
But how many hockey players do you think could leave hockey and step into another sport and be fairly successful?
Yeah, probably not.
I think they could step into like cycling, high aerobic activity, very lower body output.
Yeah, probably not
but
a ton.
I don't know if they would be able to get into, say, if you put them into even just a flag football game. Do you think they'd be successful? Or like pickup basketball, where it's maybe you're still stretching probably like the same aerobic muscles just up and down the court versus up and down like the rink, but now you got to get a lot more hand involvement in not necessarily just stick control, but shooting, getting the angle, like quickly figuring that stuff out. I think that's where you're going to start to see the difference. Whereas that leads me to believe a little bit more hardware coded.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one.
But yeah, there's just so much. I mean, this is why we brought in this episode for anyone that's still listening to us to like blab on about this. Like, it's not something you kind of talk about in passing, but it's not something that's truly addressed. And figuring out if someone's software versus hardware coding, I don't think it is, it's not necessarily something like, I don't want it to be at least, like a wide versus narrow ISA where everyone's going to base their training off of this. I think it's something to take into account when you're noticing the athletes that you have in the room and where you might, like you had mentioned before, allocate training economy for a little bit more of like, I'm not going to change exercises, right? I just might say like, we're predominantly maybe a hardware kind of team. We should probably train a little bit more software oriented things or vice versa.
Right. That could be as simple as just like, all right, we're going to do more jumping. We're going to spend more time on the field doing jumps and sprints. We're going to do more like tactile, like proprioceptive work, in our warm-ups. It's always on a spectrum though. And at the end of the day, like all of those things to me, like all of those things should always like be a part of a good, solid, well-rounded like performance program. It's more of just like the dosage, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
The more I think about this, it's like you can't. I feel like we come up with these like labels for things and concepts to try to
explain.
Like just to kind of better conceptualize. But at the end of the day, like it's very messy. The human body is very complex. We talk about different types of machines and cars. Like the most complex of all those is the human body. So you can never really put it in one box. But I think it's good to like at least conceptualize these things, and you can kind of see some generalities, if nothing else. It's never going to be blatant black and white answer as to, okay, this archetype of athlete walks in, you do this. This archetype of athlete walks in, you do this
You do
instead
this.
of this. Yeah. At least that's my opinion as of now. Subject to change as always.
But I think, again, like it really, that's where it kind of plays into that role on that front.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a fun theoretical concept.
Yeah, it is for sure.
And if, like you said, it doesn't necessarily have to be a main driver of your training, but it's something fun to think about when you're creating your training to make sure that it is conducive to what you're looking to get. And I think that's fun.
100%. Yeah, it is fun.
Yeah.
Alrighty, folks. Well, this is
Give me a review.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of this Reign, Liberty, and Justice for Apple. I don't think it's my favorite Reign flavor. I think it's so tough for me to go against the white gummy bear. It's just
Yeah, white gummy bear is so good.
white
But I
gummy
like
bear
the
is really
apple.
good. I also like the blue Raz, the razzleberry
Sour gummy worm.
sour gummy worm. But this is probably like a fourth after that one. So I'll give this like an 8.2. Really good.
I think I would put that, having tasted it, right underneath sour gummy worm as like
Ooh,
the second best Reign.
yeah. For me,
And
it's
I
like
like-
third.
I really like the white gummy bear.
Yeah, white gummy bear and the razzleberry for me are like 1 and 2. This is probably number 3, and I do really like the sour gummy worm. I like the orange cream too. I think they'd probably do the best. Them or Ghost do the best orange cream flavor in my opinion.
I think I might like Reign's a little bit better than the Ghost
Yeah.
one.
I think I
It's
do
a-
too, honestly.
It's a little bit more cream oriented than just straight up orange.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's good. Reign does a good job on that. I like the apple. I like the way that it turned out.
Big fan. Yeah, I like this a little bit better than the Warheads sour green apple from Ghost.
Yes.
I'm just a little bit more. It's not quite as sour. It's more just like a true apple flavor. I'm not super. I know Brian, you're big on more so the sour end of the spectrum. I'm a little bit more the sweet end of the spectrum. I feel like this is a good kind of blend almost.
I agree.
Not too much of either one.
I'm definitely more leaning towards sour. Now, I will say this, like, I can't really get through an entire green apple sour Warheads. I kind of do about a half a can because it's almost so sour that it's almost like overpoweringly sweet it's such a weird way, so sugary it tastes like.
Mhm.
Versus
Yeah, that
this,
one's
like,
more of a sipper.
yeah, this one is like you could gas that can because it's a little bit more true apple leaning with like a tartness.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what I love about it. This guy, the Bubblicious Strawberry Splash. Not a big bubblegum guy. I'm just not. I love Ghost. I like the initial taste of strawberry. I don't like the finish of bubblegum. I don't think they did a bad job on the flavor because I think it tastes the way it's intended to taste. But I'm not a bubblegum guy. I'm not a cotton candy guy. I'm not a bubblegum guy. And for that, I'm probably going like 6.4. Like if it's in the fridge, I'll drink it, but I'm not in any way, shape, or form like opting into grabbing that over something else. Can's cool. It's good Ghost formula. Everything else is nice, but it's just not a bubblegum dude, not a cotton candy guy, not a fruit punch guy. It's just it.
What was that?
I don't know. You saw that too, right?
Yeah, it was like a little white thing that flew through the air. It looked like, I don't know if it was like a feather or like a cobweb or maybe you have a ghost in there.
I was gonna say it's my house. I said ghost, and all of a sudden this guy like pops up behind me. Like I'm gonna get it now. I get possessed. But yeah, there you have it, folks. That's our review. That's definitely a fun topic that we wanted to. We like to find something that we can just go for an hour on, and I think this was exactly that. So appreciate you kind of digging that up, Christian. But follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere you get your podcasts. Of course, subscribe to us on YouTube, like the video, share it to others. If you think we're idiots,
send it to them, talk shit about us. It helps spread it, but like we love it. We love doing this for you guys. Follow us on Instagram. It's bevboys.tv. Our personals are always attached to that. There's also links in our personals, whether it be Dungeon Rats, whether it be Hybrid Velocity, the speed course, the link to the website, bevboys.com. Get yourself a t-shirt, all that good stuff. We don't really do ads. I don't think it's because people don't like us as much, but it's a great way that you can kind of help support us and we can kind of keep things going a little bit as we go. This is not our full-time job, but of course, again, you know where to find us. We love it when you listen to us. Thank you, and we'll see you in the next one.
Thanks, guys. Peace.
Peace.